So Diamond Sky, I think one could see it as like a companion book to The Reign of Clarity that I wrote back in 2006. I say that even though Diamond Sky, the original version of it, was much earlier. But why I say it is because, in a way, they're both introductions to the path. But Reign of Clarity, in a way, is a kind of scholarly work. If you like, it's an introduction to what the scholar studies, if they're following the Sakya tradition. Diamond Sky is more about what would you meditate. So it's like more to the meditative side of this pattern of the path, because the path is both study, philosophy, one might say, and of course practice, meditation, experience. They should be in harmony, of course, but there's distinct presentations for them. So Diamond Sky more veers towards that, though nothing is absolutely watertight and kind of in utterly separate categories. Also, Diamond Sky was written quite a long time ago, but now I've revisited it because the French publishers, Rabsal Publications, wanted to bring out a new edition. And I thought it was an opportunity to revisit it, to rewrite it in many parts, and also to extend. So it's about half as long as it was previously. Also, in a sense, it's a little more rime, one might say, to use that Tibetan term, a little bit more ecumenical or boundaryless between the traditions than Reign of Clarity is. Although there's nothing unorthodox in it whatsoever, and it is very clearly indebted massively to to Kuntrat Lundrup and Sakya Pandita and so on, and Sona Semo and so on. So as I say, I wrote it many years ago, just after Kamata Rinpoche actually gave me the authority to teach Vajrayana, but just recently I've revisited it. But it still has the same basic structure, just very expanded. So the intelligence of the structure is this. The first chapter is a history, and that may sound very scholarly, and I've just said the work is really about meditation. But nevertheless, we need to know where does the teaching come from in order that we can have some confidence that it's not some just recently cooked up thing in some New Age laboratory off Santa Monica Boulevard or wherever New Age laboratories are located these days. It's not that. It's straight out of the old days, not straight out of Santa Monica. And so I traced the history in that first chapter from Lord Buddha himself. I explained a little bit about who Lord Buddha was from Mahayana perspective, then through the great masters in India, the great philosophical schools, and then to the four major Tibetan schools, Sakya Kagyu, Kadam, which became Gelug, and Nyingma. So I introduced the cast of characters, really, who are the grey eminences behind the teachings in the rest of the text. But that's so that we Westerners can feel, well, I'm part of a tradition here. If I can connect with this, I'm heir to this. This is what my inheritance is. This came from these guys, these people, and I'm part of this chain now. So it's often said when teachings are given, some account of the pedigree of the teachings should be given at the same time to create this sense of faith and connectedness. So I deal with that. And then chapter 2, well, it's about taking refuge, of course, but I begin that by really talking about Buddha nature. You see, the teaching, the Diamond Sky is a path teaching, so it's structured, like for beginners, that then through advanced levels of practice, from the level of beginner, going through the stages of experience until the most subtle teachings. But at the same time, I begin chapter 2 by pointing out that actually the end is already, the goal is already present, which is the fundamental Vajrayana assumption. Because I wrote the book as a preparation for Vajrayana, essentially. So I talked there at the beginning of chapter 2 about the fact that the nature of our mind is already is always been primordially pure. In the sutras, this is called the Buddha nature, the potential for Buddhahood. In the tantras, sometimes we call it the all-base causal tantra. If we recognize the nature of our mind, right now, we are Buddhas, but we don't recognize it due to our accumulated ignorance and disturbing emotions. But if we did, we would find it is primordially pure, and all the qualities of enlightenment would manifest immediately. So that's to give us, again, a kind of deeper confidence, even more than being part of the lineage, that the lineage of the Buddha in a way is present in us. And that is why Vajrayana works. So then I go back from that to talk about entering the path by the practice of taking refuge. I unpick what from a Vajrayana point of view, the refuges are: the three jewels of common Dharma, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and the Lama. So I explain how the Lama, from a Vajrayana point of view, is all those three jewels. So that's chapter 2, getting us started. And then chapter 3, again following the logic of how it's taught in the great works, not just in the Sakya, but also Kagyu and Kadam and Nimma traditions, I talk about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma. Because we may have entered into Buddhism, we may have some confidence in the Dharma, but we bring enormous baggage. Yes, from an ultimate point of view, that baggage is illusory, but we have enormous baggage of our rigidity, of our disturbing emotions, our prejudices, our clingings. In short, the seed of Buddha nature we may be beginning to cultivate, but it can so easily be strangled by the weeds of our negativity that we've been carrying with us, not just from this beginning of this lifetime, but we would say in a Dharma point of view, from the beginning of this lifetime. So we need space. For that seed to grow, it needs space. The religious word for that space is renunciation, letting go of that which is unnecessary, which is dragging us down, which is weighing us down. The best way to do that is to meditate on what we call the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, the preciousness of our human life. Right now, we have this wonderful opportunity for the seed of our Buddha nature to come to fruition because of the particular type of freedom we have and a connection with, authentic Dharma. It makes this human life really amazing and wonderfully powerful now. So that first point is, we have power. But then we need to deepen that sense of the immediacy of our opportunity by thinking about impermanence. And thinking about impermanence means, of course, none other than death. Everybody's friend, death, that which will come to all of us. The death in which we're actually living even now, because everything is disintegrating in a moment of its arising. So we have to take death to heart, not to induce depression or psychosis or suicide, but to become actually fully alive in this present moment, because it's all we really know we have. So we engage deeply with reflecting on impermanence, to let go of so much unnecessary stuff that we thought was necessary, but it's not, and it's going to hold us back. So impermanence is like clear out. Meditating impermanence is like the clear out of the junk we don't need. It kind of gives us a proper perspective. It's like you need a horizon to have a perspective, to be able to see things properly in the landscape. We all need the horizon of impermanence and death to do that. And then we need to think about, what does go on? What goes on is simply, through dependent origination, the imprints of our actions and choices that we make now. They determine what will be tomorrow. They determine what will be in the future. So we better get serious about our choices and actions now. And in the Dharma sense, that means aligning ourselves with the good advice of Buddha in terms of what is ethical and what is not. And finally, we round off the meditation of 4 thoughts by considering, actually, I've been in a prison from beginningless time. I've not known it. I've not wanted to acknowledge it, but I've been in a prison. I'm my own jailer. I lock myself in through my selfishness, but I'm revolving on this wheel of birth and death, to change metaphors from prison to wheel of birth and death. And I put myself there, and unless I do something about it by engaging with the Dharma practice, and therefore encountering the timeless, the unconditioned, I'll continue in this succession of ups and downs, comings and goings, births and deaths, happinesses and sufferings, and even all those temporary happinesses being just, as Buddha pointed out, suffering in another guise, because I cling to them as real and permanent when they always will let me down. So the 4 thoughts are the great kind of disintoxication process, getting real about the world, getting real about our life and what it means. And it's absolutely necessary for us all to do that, to give our Dharma sense, a real Dharma practice, a realism. And therefore we learn to turn away from samsara. We're not enlightened, but we're realistic at least. And that is when the the second stage of practice, the Mahayana stage of practice, comes into our range of possibilities. Because we're not so self-obsessed and neurotic as we were previously. There's been some space created in our life. And that should lead us into, as I described it elsewhere, developing a sense of universal responsibility or altruism, which we call bodhicitta, expressed literally in the Bodhisattva vow. But in this chapter, I talk more about, in a way, from the perspective of meditation, how do you grow that kind heart, that open-heartedness of bodhicitta? For most of us, it will only grow in a kind of developmental way. And its beginning is actually to acknowledge our sense of indebtedness to others. Because indebtedness to others, and perhaps starting very small, but just the indebtedness to our family, is the roots of loving kindness. And from loving kindness, eventually will grow this wonderful flower of bodhicitta. But it begins with loving kindness. The wish that my family, my mother, this person close to me has happiness and the cause of happiness now and happiness for the future. And increasing that by gradually making all beings into my family. Because in a way they are. From deeper perspective, everybody's been one's family at different times. So I meditate loving kindness, this beautiful, joyous meditation that all beings are filled with happiness and the cause of happiness. Which, by the way, is the greatest cheerer-up process in the world. Don't bother with loving yourself. Love others. You'll find joy and positivity in life that way. Not by some narcissistic self-bathing, but by thinking about others. You've got to forget about yourself and go out and find what others need, as a great poet said recently. And then from that comes compassion. Compassion, which is the deepening of loving kindness. If you want the happiness of others, you will soon encounter the fact that beings are imprisoned by suffering. Yes, from a Dharma point of view, in a way, they're their own jailers, but we cannot stand back because we're interconnected with them. So we must do what we can, not just to bring joy, to wish joy in their lives, happiness, but freedom from suffering. And so compassion engages with that difficult thing, that beings are suffering. To engage with practice loving kindness is joyful because everybody is happy through this. And that's nice to concentrate on. But compassion means more engaging with the blood and guts that life is so often comprised of, the accidents and the blood and guts, the messy, nasty stuff. We should have enough bravery through meditating loving kindness to go on to compassion. So that's why loving kindness precedes compassion generally in our sequence of practice. And compassion is, may she, may he, may they, may all beings finally be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering, of course, self-centered behavior. And when I've really developed these wonderful social emotions, to call them that truly, of loving kindness and compassion, emotions that connect me with others, which in a way melt the barriers between myself and others, then bodhicitta can really arise. Because bodhicitta is this, in a way, first of all, this question, one will come to ask ourselves, how can I really make others' lives be pervaded with happiness and be free from suffering? I don't have the mechanics to do that. I don't have the wisdom to do that right now. I don't have the power. I don't even have the depth of compassion to want it truly and fully. And neither does those people around me. Neither do the gods. If the gods are there, they don't. Neither do even the great masters of the Shravakayana, who've simply achieved liberation from their own suffering. But there are those who have this full capability. And they're Buddhas. Beings who have stripped away all their disturbing emotions and ignorance and revealed the core qualities of compassion and wisdom, which are the qualities of an enlightened being, one who is free from self-centeredness entirely and opens up to the world. And so we should aspire there to become a Buddha. Like, to use a simple analogy, if you want to heal people physically, it's good to become a doctor, to train in medicine. But a doctor can't heal the mind. It's great to be a doctor, but it's not enough, of course. But analogously, when we have loving kindness and compassion, will come to generate this bodhicitta, the resolve to become a Buddha, to unlock within oneself the potential to really serve others, not just for a day, not just for a week, not just for life, but limitlessly. As you say, until all sentient beings are released from samsara. That is our perspective when we generate bodhicitta. And one way to really stabilize that is the meditation called Tonglen, or sending and taking. So I mentioned that in this chapter. So with that we have the meditation, the altruistic meditation, loving kindness, compassion, and conventional bodhicitta. Will that lead us to Buddhahood? No. Why not? Because they soften one's being, they devote one's strength and power to help others, but they don't answer the fundamental problem of where does suffering really come from? Because suffering comes from ignorance, the non-seeing of reality. In us, that manifests particularly as grasping at a fiction of self that sets me apart from the world. But in a deeper sense, ignorance is any clinging to things existing in a standalone, independent, substantial way, rather than as they truly appear, always through interdependence. So I need to align my seeing of the world with the deep truth of the world, which is interdependence and emptiness. That's why compassion is wonderful. Conventional bodhicitta, as we call it, is wonderful, but it's not enough. I must have the ultimate bodhicitta, the ultimate enlightenment thought of seeing reality as it is. And for that I need to train in two meditations, shamatha, calm abiding, and vipassana, or insight. Why not just insight? After all, insight, vipassana, is exactly that, clear seeing the world. And the answer is because actually, practically for most of us, it can't work like that. We have to develop a stillness and a even settling and one-pointedness in our way of experiencing the world moment to moment, so that our mind becomes stable and focused. Without that, attempts to look into reality, to examine and unpick our mistaken projections, will be just an intellectual exercise at best, and probably won't even be that. So for this understanding of emptiness to be experiential, to really change us here rather than simply here, we need first to train in shamatha and calm abiding. So I explained that in this chapter. I explained the obstacles to calm abiding and the stages, the 9 stages of settling the mind, and what are the qualities of calm abiding, having explained why it's necessary. And then I go on to explain vipassana. Now, in Grain of Clarity, for instance, I explain the view, the Madhyamaka view. That's like a presentation of the same teachings, but in an intellectual way. Here in Diamond Sky, following what is taught in the introduction to our Lamdre, or Path in its Fruit System, I explain how we meditate vipassana, as it were, on the cushion, not theoretically, but experientially. And the way we do that is by, in a way, progressively dismantling our rigid view of the world, our subject-object duality. So first of all, in our meditation experience, examine all these experiences, these objects that seem to be rising, sounds, visual things. What are they? Are they really outside of the mind, or is it just the mind itself? And then, having done that, I look into the mind, which is, I've now discovered, is the basis of all these experiences, all these appearances and objects. And again ask, is that real? Is there a real thing there? Can I grasp it? Can I hold it? Can I take hold of it and say, this is the mind? And when I look, again and again, looking straight into mind, as well, looking at mind with mind, I do not find it. I search for the mind and cannot find it. I can't find a place where it began, cannot find a place where it endures now, or even a place where it ends. I can't give it a shape. I can't give it a location. So it's the basis of all things, and yet it is unfindable. It is unfindable as space or the sky. And that is the discovery through vipassana. Not a theory, but actual living experience of the emptiness of phenomena, including the very basis of phenomena, the mind itself. And that of course, is therefore completely in harmony with the Madhyamaka philosophical position, that the nature of reality is unelaborated, neither is it something truly existent, neither is it just nothingness. Reality cannot be defined or grasped through label or concept. It is beyond all those. It's unelaborated. That is the profound meditation of the Mahayana. Is that sufficient for enlightenment? Yes, it could be, to bring together the compassionate meditation system and the wisdom meditation system of the Mahayana could be. But actually we understand in Sakakaju Nimangelo that Buddha actually, for those practitioners who had that wonderful bodhicitta motivation, but also had other good characteristics as practitioners, Buddha proposed the tantric method of following the path, what is taught in the tantras, or the Vajrayana. So in the sixth chapter, I explained the Vajrayana. Once again, as I said elsewhere, not by revealing any deep secrets of the Vajrayana, but by explaining the intelligence of the Vajrayana, how you really encounter it, what it's for. Well, it's for that goal of Buddhahood. It's entirely in its motivation, therefore, consistent with Mahayana. Its view of reality is the same, that reality is beyond elaboration. But its method of realizing these is much more skillful and therefore much quicker, because it has the exceptional skillful means of receiving initiations in which the possibility of realizing the view is made possible for us, even as beginners, to get some glimpse of the view. And then through the subsequent practice of the sadhanas, the deities which were given in the initiations, we can actualize very quickly in our life those qualities of compassion or wisdom or power which characterize a Buddha. Or if we practice the highest levels of Tantra, we can come to transform the very experiences of birth and death into the process of achieving Buddhahood. That is through the system of Anuttara Yoga, Supreme Yoga Tantra. So I explained that the essential ingredients of Vajrayana in that chapter 6. I explain also the ways in which the four schools have their own particular kind of pathways within Vajrayana. What are the particular preferred tantric systems of the Sakya, Gaju, Kadama, and Nyingma, so that people at least hear these names and have some sense of the distinctions between the traditions, but the unity. Because the chapter speaks to explain how Vajrayana as a whole works. But at the same time, I want to get people to understand, and each school has, in a way, an equally powerful meditation practices in the Vajrayana, but prefers particular ones from the range of teachings originally presented by the Buddha. So Vajrayana for us is the supreme way to fulfill our Mahayana aspirations. It's not a standalone system. It makes no sense without the rest. So the subtitle for the book is Preparing for Vajrayana, because that's what you cannot practice. So the underlying logic is you can't practice Vajrayana without the preceding stages. But the preceding stages, their value to us is getting to this point where Vajrayana will work. Without them, it won't work. It is their culmination, and at the same time, they're its necessary conditions. So this I wrote in this book, Diamond Sky. And if you want to know, the title comes from a song. You need to listen to it. It'll do you good.